Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good evening, Madam President. We're now live on YouTube. The link got changed, so we're going to put the new link up on the district website and on the Google Calendar, but we're now live on YouTube, so you're all set.
Thank you. I think there's Dr. Roman and Ms. Carol Ann are still in the attendees, so you want to switch them in, and we'll begin in 1 second.
Okay, they're in. So there's some people signed up, but there's nobody signed up on agenda items. It's not agenda, ma'am.
So let's do non-agenda items. So the next people that we're going to do are non-agenda items, and Mr. Kevin Barnett is the first one, but he's not there, I don't see.
They're
Bennett.
logged in under the same name, so let me let Tammy in the room and Mr. Bennett be there to speak. So hold on, man.
Thank you.
Mr. Bennett, you're now in the room. If you can unmute your microphone, and turn on your video, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, you're on. Kevin Bennett, you gotta say your name.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you, sir. You're all set.
Okay. Yeah, I'm here because the school took my daughter's phone. And ever since they took it, she's unsafe. And you know, I have to get in my car and drive around and make sure she is safe when I can. I don't understand why the school didn't give her her phone when she left the school that day, because whatever you're doing with it, whatever kind of whatever you're trying to achieve with it is during school hours. It's not in my house. I do my house. I don't need the school to do my house. So now I'm left paying for a bill that I'm not able to use. And I've been paying for it for about a month now. I didn't know schools would parent my kid for me. I thought I had to parent my kid. I don't know what this society and how fast everything is going and how you taking the parenting part of it into your own hands, but that device doesn't belong to you. You're not on the, your name is nowhere on the contract of that device. It doesn't belong to you. I don't feel you have the right to do with it what you want to do. I feel that you overstep your bounds, and I don't know a law that says you can do that. If there's a law in the law books that says you can do that, I would like to know what that stature is. Give me the information on that. You place my daughter in danger weekends and everywhere since she leaves your school. Soon as she leaves your school, she's in danger because I'm not there. Soon as she get off that bus, she's in danger because I'm not there. And I have no way of, monitoring her or seeing what kind of crowd she's around, who's there, who's not there, and what she could be walking into at any given time. I'm a single parent. I don't have nobody to depend on but myself. And ever since you took that phone, you broken down all the communication in my home. That's why I pay for it. I pay the bill. Doesn't matter how much it is. because I need it. I need the service to raise my daughter and to keep her safe. I hope nothing happens to her, but if it does, I know you don't think it's my fault. It can't be my fault. I did my job. I bought a phone for her. Well, yeah, I'm gonna need a lawyer because maybe her mother will sue me or something and have her back in her home, or you know, I'm gonna need a lawyer for a lot of different circumstances behind this the taking of the phone.
And give it back.
Yeah, I need it back immediately.
Give it back.
I'm done.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure that somebody from central office will be contacting you tomorrow. Yes, Mr. Forget?
From, excuse me, Central Hudson, you said?
No, central office.
Okay. Okay,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
The next person that signed up to speak, ma'am, is Miss Tammy Hollins, and she's using the same connection. Your
Good
5
evening.
minutes has started, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Board of Education. Let me first just say I want to thank you for your service. I know it's very arduous, the task, the things that you need to do, things that are at hand. So I thank you. I appreciate and I respect each one of you. My concern is about the phone confiscation. And it's not just for an individual, but it's for all our students. So I just got a couple of questions and I want to just also make a couple of comments. My question, or one of my questions, is how many phones are confiscated on a daily basis? Okay, so that's the first question. How many phones are confiscated, do you know, Board of Education, on a daily basis? My second question, how many phones are sitting in the care of the Board of Education or the enlarged school district? And that's daily, quarterly, and yearly, because I did read the confiscation policy that was created for the Board of Education, and a student could have their phone taken for a day or 2 or 3, depending on when the parent comes. Then it goes to a quarter. Then if it happens again, it goes yearly. So how many phones do you know, or could you tell me, are sitting again daily, quarterly, or yearly? Then my third question is, how bad is the problem that our children's phones need to be confiscated? How bad is that problem that those phones need to be confiscated? I think that's the first piece. Then I want to say to the Board of Education, do you know that child abductions and sex or human trafficking is real? That stuff is real. Kids are abducted every day. Children are picked up and abducted and taken every day for just human trafficking purposes. Okay? You got parents who work. You got parents who go to school. Some parents do both. And that's their only means, the phone. We don't have landlines anymore. That's out of date or outdated. You don't have pay phones. We haven't had them in years. So parents, the communication between that parent and that child is done through that phone, that cellular phone. Okay? You got parents who can't contact their children, the children who can't contact their parents. You've got students who do their siblings because they're old enough to do them at home. They have to call the parent or text the parent and let them know that they're home. And then what happens if a child lose keys or a student lose keys? I remember as a student, some of you may too, when you lost the key. Maybe it dropped on the bus if you use the bus. Maybe it dropped while you walk, but you don't know that until you get home and can't get in. How does that student call their parent to tell them, I can't get in because I dropped my keys? Parents are at work, parents are at school or wherever they are. They're thinking their child is in the house or their children in the house safe. That's a problem. I think my concern overall is that our cell phones are our landlines. Our cell phones are our lifeline. I'm sorry. Our cell phones, they are our lifelines. That's what we use now because of technology. I don't know, how the Board of Education signed off on a policy that basically, when you look at it, and I got the code of conduct because it's in there too. When you look at what you're saying or what you passed or you allowed as part of a process, because I went to go get a phone and I could not get that phone. It's illegal. You don't have the authority to overstep the parent, the guardian. You don't have that authority. You can't parent students. That's what the parents or the guardian is for. Let them parent them. Let them, guard them. If there's a situation, if there's something going on, the only right you have is to contact that parent and let them know what's going on. And hopefully they will take care of the situation. I had children that went through the school district, and I never let the school district take care of my children. I always came and took care of.
Point of order, Madam President. The 5 minutes has expired.
I expect all the student phones to be given back to them. And for the students who don't get a phone back, I don't expect you to put them in the class.
Ma'am,
Yes.
your 5 minutes are up.
Okay.
Thank you for talking to us.
Okay.
Somebody will contact you tomorrow morning.
Thank you so much,
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. McCoy, who's next?
You have one more person to speak. His name is Mr. Leonard Lee. Or two more people. Mr. Lee's next. Hold on, let me put him into the room.
Yes, we do. We have two people to speak, Mr. Lee and then Ms. Lovemore. So Mr. Lee is first.
Doesn't look like Mr. Lee's joining.
Yes,
the room
he
yet.
is.
Is he here?
He's right there. I can see his picture.
Perfect. Mr.
Okay.
Lee, you're all set. Your 5 minutes has begun.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Hi, my name is Coach Leonard Lee. I'm the head coach and director for the Hook Elite Boxing Club. And I'm coming before you guys today to talk about having a tournament, a junior Olympic tournament up at Newburgh Free Academy. And what I'm trying to do is actually get the fee waived. I deal with your kids, our kids, the city of Newburgh kids for the last 12 years. And we're trying to do a fundraiser. We are 501(c)(3). I deal with underprivileged kids. And what I'm trying to do is like what I just said, is have a national tournament here in the city of Newburgh. Over the last 12 years, we produced over 20 national champions. We've tried to do more than just boxing. We have an after-school program, a fitness program. We're trying to do the right thing by the city of Newburgh and its youth. And I'm here appealing to you guys to strive to get to get it waived, to get the fee waived that the Board of Education has given us. So that's where I'm at. I guess with that said, I guess you guys understand where I'm at with this. Hello?
Yes, we see you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
You have one more person, ma'am. I can let her in the room.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy.
Ms. Lovemore, if you can unmute your mic, your 5 minutes will begin.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
You're all set.
Yeah. My name is Sharice Lovemore. My concern is, what is the alternate plan to the original plan? If a parent does come and they don't agree with the plan that's implemented for phones, whatever the steps are, there should always be an alternate, also based on what was already said. A child, a single parent, a child that goes home by themselves, that goes to an empty home, that gets off the bus stop and have to go to wherever it is, check in, watching other siblings. It's almost like it's like a catch-22. Like, we just put this child's whole life in danger, or children in danger. We need to come up with a better plan, and it doesn't need to wait a week or 2 weeks and 3 weeks. And until we do that, there needs to be an immediate action, which is to issue everyone their phones. And then whatever that new plan is, make sure a copy goes home with each student and to each parent, and is noted or posted and also mentioned at meetings, so that the word can get around what this plan is. It's not fair to the students or the parents for this unforeseen plan that you have in place. And I don't know if this is backed by the Board of Ed or it's a plan made just by that individual school. Whatever that plan is, that's the new plan that should be made. It needs to be in all the schools, the same plan for the phone, so that no matter where you go, we know what that code is or what that plan is for a cell phone. And how quick or how soon is this going to be done? How long do students have to wait to get their phones back? How long? And if they don't get them, are you willing to pay the bill, the monthly bill for that phone until it's reissued? That's basically it. I just want to know what the new plan is. This is calls for immediate action. Immediate action. Hello?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your comments, and someone will be in touch with you soon. Okay, probably tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
There's nobody else signed up to speak, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move on with our agenda to our interim superintendent, Mr. Forget.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening, we have 3 presentations for you. First one is a quick update on the pandemic and COVID in the district. And Mr. Bear will give you a brief update.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. Thank you, Board of Ed, for the opportunity to have a brief conversation. I just want to touch on 3 areas. One is the March 2nd change in the guidelines that require that we don't need to have masks on anymore. We're also going to talk about the positivity and quarantine rate, and also just updates on the home test kits that we have provided. So number 1, as you know, the governor and the Department of Health have indicated we don't require masks in school. Students are adjusting to this. Some are wearing masks, some are not, as well as our adults. And we are very clear that if anyone wants to wear a mask, they certainly can do so. There is one caveat to the guidelines that if a person is positive and has isolated for 5 days, when they return after the 5th day, they're required to wear the mask from days 6 through 10. And we are working with the buildings and the nurses to support that. Second is our positivity rate and our quarantine. As you know, this has been an up and down process. Usually on the summertime, it goes up, goes down, and the wintertime it goes up, and then it goes down again shortly after that in the spring. So it's kind of followed that pattern. I just want to indicate that we had reached a height in January. We had 166 kids who were positive, and we had 504 of them that were also quarantined. Staff, it was 57 were positive. As where we are today, the numbers have significantly decreased. We currently only have 8 positive cases of students and 5 quarantines, and only 1 teacher, none of whom are quarantined. And I'm happy to say that for the first time since March of 2020, when we do our daily COVID update as a team, we had 0 cases on Thursday, March 3rd. That was the first time in almost 2 years where we were able to get together and not have a reported case. We continue to get home kits, COVID home kits that we are asked to distribute. They're coming a lot more than I was hoping for. We are doing our best to distribute them according to the Department of Health guidelines, giving them to families and community. We've been trying to also ask them not to send anymore because we do have a healthy supply. I want to thank Mary Lou Carolan in the Newburgh Free Library, as well as our Phys team, because they have helped us enormously with the ability to distribute these throughout our community and to our students and staff and employees. So that's my update. I just want to give you what I think is good news, and we'll continue to watch this as we move forward through the spring.
Thank you, Mr.
Board members, questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Bear. Go ahead, Mr. Ford.
And our next item is to introduce to you the 2022-2023 draft outline of the budget. So you'll receive 2 presentations this evening. The first presentation you'll receive from Mr. McCoy and from Mr. Goldbeck, which is an upper level presentation of where we stand with the current numbers that we've been provided. And then you're going to receive a presentation on the curriculum and instruction proposal for the use of the funds. So Mr. Goldbeck and Mr. McCoy.
So we do have a very brief budget presentation, the initial draft of the budget. I'm going to let Mr. McCoy start things off, and I will be finishing up. So, Mr. McCoy, you're on.
Good evening, Mr. Forget and members of the board. Thank you very much. Tonight we're presenting the 2022-2023 budget. So the key points in this year's budget. There's an overall increase in spending of 4% from 21-22, and most of that is salary and benefits. And we're pleased to announce that there will be no salary increase, no tax levy increase.
Mr. McCoy, can you pause for 1 second? Mr. Goldbeck, could you mute?
Pardon me. Sure, thank you.
Mr. McCoy, can you start again, please? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. So thank you very much. So some of the key points for the 22-23 budget, we're anticipated a 4% spending increase over 21-22. As we know, almost 80% of the budget is salary and benefits. We're very pleased to announce that there's going to be no tax levy increase for the 22-23 school year. And that will be the 7th year in a row that the district has presented a no tax levy increases. And we started that back in the 16-17 school year. All the current initiatives and programs that we're currently running in the district will continue, and those will continue using our federal funds for any new initiatives. The overall budget, we're projecting at $304,950.18. It's a budget-to-budget increase of $11,742,334.
Mr. McCoy, you're cutting out.
So there's no tax levy increase. We're having an increase in state aid of $13 million. We're losing the loss of the $3 million in CARES funds. And we have other increases of $384,000. That leaves a budget gap of $500,000. And Mr. Goldbeck is going to go into the numbers to tell you how we're going to make up the budget gap of $500,000.
Well, as you can see by the top line there, our plan is to utilize reserves to alleviate any revenue shortfall in the next year. Our overall revenue estimate, including budgeted state aid, which right now is at $185,500,000. Other revenue, which is at a number of categories, of $118,950,018. So total revenue we're looking at right now is $304,450,018. Our expenditure budget right now at the 4% looks like $304,950,018. That's a $500,000 difference from what we're looking at in revenue. And what we're planning on doing shortfall, and you can see the breakdown of that: $100,000 out of the workers' comp reserve, $100,000 out of the unemployment reserve, $100,000 out of the employee retirement system, and $200,000 out of the teachers' retirement system. And so what that will do, obviously, will make up the shortfall. But in addition, it will demonstrate our use of reserves, which is basically the intended use here is to minimize the impact on taxpayers, and that's in this next slide. Actually, it also satisfies our audit requirement and as well as the auditors from the Office of State Controller, because basically we're supposed to show use of those reserves, so that's what we'll be doing there. And again, it puts us in a situation where we have no increase in the tax levy. I should say that looking at historical numbers, we should be able to generate enough fund balance at the end of next year so that we don't actually go into those dollars. They're there to balance the budget and demonstrate that we have enough money to cover any expenditures out of next year's budget. But intention is not to spend that money, and we're hoping that that the fund balance at the end of next year will come to fruition on that. So that's our presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I see Mr. Stradiron's hand.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that presentation. I do have a question about, I know that there was a $3 million loss of the CARES fund for this year. Is there
Correct.
an anticipated shortfall for next year for any of the federal or state money for the COVID relief? And what amounts of money are we talking about?
I don't have the federal money in front of me right now, but I believe the only one that's sunsetting next year is the CARES Act money. Am I correct on that? Does anybody have that information? Because I don't.
Yes, the American Rescue Plan sunsets in September of 2024.
So at some point, I believe the board needs to prepare for when that money ends, whether it's next year or the year after. The board needs to have an idea of where the money is being spent now and over the next year and a half, so that we can prepare for when that money ends, so it does not impact the classroom. So can we start that process so that we can at least find out right now what that money is being spent on, itemized, so we can see exactly where it's been spent, and then how it's going to affect the budget in the next 2 years?
Mr. Forget?
Absolutely, Mr. Stradiron. We have to have a transition plan, and we have to make sure that we sustain everything that we're trying to do. We attempted to do that prior to starting the budget conversations when I shared with you the way we are using the ARP, the way, and Dr. Spindler shared with you the way she had laid out the CARES and the CURSA funds. So we spent quite a bit of time sharing with you how we plan to spend the American Rescue Plan. We listened to your comments and requests and reflections, and we're in the process of revising that by rethinking the use of teaching assistants and increasing teaching assistants and a variety of other things that you shared. Once we finalize that, I will share it out again so that you see how we plan to spend that money over the course of the next 2 years, with a hopeful transition plan for sustaining what we have embedded in those grants. But you're absolutely right. We have to think now what's going to happen in 2025.
Just as a follow-up, when we get to the curriculum section, I would like to know whether or not the teaching assistants are back to the levels we were at a few years ago. I believe it's K through 2 that were cut. So I just want to make sure that those levels have been returned. Thank you.
Ms. Peterson, you had your hand up before. Is there something that you would like to add?
Thank you, Madam President. I just actually wanted to reiterate what Mr. Forget was saying. I know that we have been trying to share the federal money and how we are allocating that, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Mr. Forget, would you like to continue with the second part of that?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Goldbeck. Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Appreciate it. And we will transition into curriculum and instruction. I'll turn this over to Mrs. Moriarty and Ms. Soto.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. Good evening, members of the Board of Education. It is our pleasure to share our division's curriculum and instruction budget presentation. Next slide. This slide shows our division's organizational chart where teamwork is vital. The team improves teaching and learning, nurtures relationships, strengthens and builds leadership capacity by providing a means for mentoring and support for teachers and administrators. We all serve as champions for students. Mrs. Moriarty.
Thank you, Ms. Soto. Good evening, everybody. Next slide, please. This slide reflects our curriculum roadmap to meet the goal, our strategic outcomes as identified in Imagine 2025, our district's strategic plan. And those goals are to mitigate regression, to be culturally responsive in our teaching and learning, to use data to inform our instruction, to prepare, to close the opportunity gap for students, to prepare our students to be college and career ready, and ultimately to cross academy field. So you can see our youngest, oh, if you could just go back for a sec, thank you. For our youngest learners represented as a Goldie here, going along the road to cross academy field. The two main areas of focus and our priorities and our approach to meeting these goals is through transformative literacy and a constructivist approach to teaching and learning. What I want everyone to know before we begin the presentation, some things about transformative literacy. Transformative literacy is an approach where students engage in work that is personally meaningful to them. They make connections to the work and the significant real-world applications that they apply to content and their skills. And under this approach, students also engage in learning activities using culturally and linguistic relevant resources. This is seen in the texts and resources used and the student projects that showcase their learning. And this is also exhibited in the work that we're doing with Dr. Hunter. Thirdly, students are active. They're meaning makers throughout their lessons. Students think together to come up with examples of how to apply their learning in real world experiences. And the teacher coaches them through that. Similarly, in the constructivist approach, the teacher is the coach that guides the learning towards the academic achievement, builds on what students already know, and promotes student agency where students' interests are valued. And this is important because as you see where we allocate the funds, how we're approaching the work. Next slide, please. So these are the priorities that we've identified as a division to meet the strategic outcomes. So the implementation of next gen standards, you've all heard of Common Core standards. You're very familiar with the Common Core learning standards. The implementation of the next gen standards is a revision of those Common Core standards. There are deletions and additions to the previous standards. These changes are aimed toward improving clarity, reducing repetition, and ensuring that the standards align appropriately with grade level, and that everybody understands what the expectations are for students when they leave a grade level. We're also looking to improve the use of our data-driven instruction. So how are we using data and multiple points of data to make decisions about the whole child and how they learn and what is the best way to inform their instruction? You've heard in multiple presentations over the course of the year about how we're implementing American Reading Company framework for literacy. So we have implemented our core in grades K through 2 across all schools at this point. We will continue to roll that out next year in grades 3 through 5. This will meet their comprehension, their fluency, their phonics, their writing, all the components of reading. In grades 6 and up, we are implementing the 100 book challenge, where students have access to hundreds of titles of books to improve their reading levels, to enhance their love and joy of reading, so that it can take them on and beyond academy field into their careers and college experiences. For many years, you've heard about the iReady and the iReady instructional arm. We're focused on using the tool with fidelity. So not only can this be used as an intervention, but additionally as an enrichment to hone the skills and identify where the learning needs are for students. Hands-on center approach to literacy and math. So we're really focused. You'll hear more about our math and literacy blocks as we go on, but really how do students have the opportunity to practice what they've learned in whole group and small group lessons, and what are the materials and resources that they do use in those centers. We've talked a lot in the last couple of years about ensuring that we are culturally responsive to our students, in the resources that we use and the approach that we deliver teaching and learning. Additionally, project-based and CTE programs is a high focus and priority area, and ensuring college and career readiness. Next slide, please. So this is just a fun slide that represents multiple facets of elementary education. We have big books, we have math, we have reading, music, art, recess, manipulatives, just opportunities for students to learn. So this slide illustrates what we offer K-5 and K-5 learning in 9 schools. The 9 schools are represented there with the total number of K-5 students in each building, the number of classroom teachers, along with the buildings that offer dual language and bilingual education, as well as in our one school at Horizons, we have the unlimited program. We have ICT teachers in each of the buildings, as well as the AIS supports for math and reading, and the number of ENL teachers. All the way to the right there, you see that as part of the program for all elementary students, we offer library, music, art, and physical education. These are the total number of teachers in each area that are shared across the buildings. Not all of them are shared, but that's the total number that we have to implement these programs to all of our students. Next slide, please. This slide highlights a typical day in the life of an elementary student. This is just one example of many. However, throughout the day of an elementary student, we have an opportunity to check in with their social emotional learning, which we call SEL. So in the top right-hand corner, you can see the mood meter. And this is, we have SEL programs that help students regulate and identify how are they feeling, how prepared are they to learn. So that's one facet to their day. They have their ELA block, which we'll talk more about, science and social studies as components to our learning. We have our math block, our enrichment and intervention, as well as our special areas. And again, those are music, library, art, and physical education. So we have a busy day in elementary world. Next slide, please. So to address our literacy and under transformative literacy, this slide shows how our 120-minute ELA block is used. Within that block, we have whole group instruction, We have time for the workshop where teachers and students conference and students are participating in learning in centers. We have time dedicated to writing, and then again, checking in small groups and conferencing. The resources that we use to support this learning are for literacy are through the American Reading Company, again, which has 16 levels of reading and 150 to 200 titles that students have access to per level. They have access to a virtual library. Teachers and students have access to a data dashboard that we call School Pace. It's a live dashboard that shows the progress of students in real time. There are multiple book bins where we call it shopping, book shopping, where they go and pick books of interest on their level. Students also have an opportunity to listen to books, read alouds, and we have homeschool resources in English and Spanish that teachers can share with families to explain the level that their child's on, to offer suggestions and supports that families can do at home to support reading. The iReady instructional arm, as I already discussed, is an integral part of the center-based time during the day, and as well as we use for diagnostic monitoring 3 times a year. The resources also support classroom libraries, and largely in part to this is administrative and teacher professional development. Next slide, please. This picture, this slide shows students in their centers. The top slide is students either listening to a read aloud or on their iReady. All the way to the left is just a sample of titles that students can listen to the books, the read alouds. They have opportunity for word work, and these are multiple ways that they demonstrate their learning in word work. And in the lower corner is students in a writing center writing their own stories and illustrating them. Next slide, please. This is a sample of the family resources that are available for teachers to share with families in English and Spanish. Next slide, please. As well, these are additional resources for our English language learners, our ELs. Not only do they have access to all of the resources that we already talked about, but in our standalone classes, ENL groups, we use Lexia, which is an opportunity for students to practice their reading, writing, speaking, and listening. There's professional development for teachers through Lexia, as well as data reports that really show the mastery of the lessons of the students. And so teachers can redesign based on the data that they get the lessons for the students. Next slide, please. Science and social studies, as I already mentioned, is an integral part of our program. This slide demonstrates some of the resources that teachers have access to use to support. And with these, one of the most popular is the Discovery Education, which provides overview of lessons, standards, tools for them to use, graphic organizers. The most highly used and requested by students are the virtual field trips that we have. Additionally, Newsela, we have that. You've heard us talk about Newsela in the past for science and social studies, very specific articles on research or historical lessons that students can use for research and reports. Next slide, please. Under math, we have a 90-minute math block. We moved this year from a 60-minute to a 90-minute math block. So students have more opportunities to practice what they've learned and use manipulatives. Our resources that we use to support our math instruction are BOE, again, the iReady instructional arm. And something that I really, really want to highlight is the use of manipulatives and our center base, again, where teachers can work alone or in small groups to practice what they're learning and master the standards. And additionally, the administrative and teacher professional development is an integral component to all teaching and learning. This is an exciting slide. It demonstrates what I was talking about, students using the manipulatives to learn. But where you see the pink, reddish pink colored bands, this is a Google Classroom that has math centers, teacher created math centers for grades K through 5 in the district. So we had the opportunity with our math director and our math TOSA to bring a group of teachers together to actually create math centers to to meet standards and areas of mastery for students. So the teachers created the centers. What standard did it match? What manipulators were necessary? How to run the center, what was needed, and put it into a Google Classroom for all teachers across the district to access. Next slide, please. And again, really important to our program, the arts, music and art, library, and phys ed. So our budget supports the manipulatives, the paint, the music instruments, the sheet music, the balls, all the gear for phys ed, and the books and the tapes and the library, everything that they need to engage our students. So for some of them, this is the best part of the day. Next slide, please. Something else that our budget has supported this year and will continue to support next year are, we're calling them pandemic-related programs and interventions, but really what they are is extended school day and school year opportunities. These have been our Winter Academy, Midwinter Academy, Spring Break Academy, our L After School program and Saturday program, as well as the summer programs and Leave and Learns. So students have an opportunity to extend their school day and their learning and approach the work in a different way than in the typical school day. Ms. Soto?
Thank you, Mrs. Moriarty. So just as Mrs. Moriarty mentioned, this is a word roll on an apple, and these are all of the core and extracurricular activities that we would like all of our middle and secondary students to participate in and create wonderful memories when they think about their educational experiences. Next slide. This is CNI secondary level. The presentation is focused on our initiatives, resources that we have our students and teachers to use. And you'll hear lots of things that Mrs. Moriarty mentions in upcoming slides. We have a responsibility to expand our courses to prepare students to be college and career ready, deliver curriculum, instruction, and assessment that is focused on transformative literacy and a constructivist approach, and to provide our staff members with ongoing and sustained professional development. Next slide, please. Our division in the secondary level supports nearly 6,000 students and many teachers 6 through 12 who specialize in their content to support these students in order to enhance learning and aid in the mastery of tasks. Next slide. Our district's middle school program is structured to respond to the unique and changing needs of adolescents. Middle school students complete a required core academic program and participate in a structured elective program, which is mandated by New York State Education Department. We're fortunate to offer honors program in the 8th grade where students may earn high school credit and Regents accreditation. Next slide, please. On this slide, there are examples of a typical middle school student schedule. Our middle school students move from class to class for their academic subjects like social studies, math, science, language arts, or languages other than English, and academic support as well. They also attend elective courses such as health, technology, consumer sciences, which elevate their studies from classroom learning to hands-on real-world experiences. Next slide, please. Being a high school student is full of unbelievable rigor. A high priority for our high school students is to be college and career ready. During the school day, our schools ensure that students grow academically in the classroom and learn the intangible lessons that happen outside of the classroom as well. As a result, we offer a variety of programs for our students that focus on enhancing their social, emotional, and physical well-being, as well as required graduation courses. In addition, our students have the opportunity to attain many college credits. Next slide. The process of building and implementing a portrait of a graduate is a community effort. This slide shows a typical high school student schedule. It shows the district's commitment to investing in educational experiences that educate the whole child. The next few slides, I will share with you the resources we have available, professional development, and ongoing collaboration to support our teachers to engage our scholars. Next slide. In math, 6 through 12, we are utilizing illustrative math to provide our students with opportunities to make connections to real-world contexts throughout the materials. Teachers are receiving professional development on how to help students become lifelong math learners. Next slide. In ELA 6 to 12, we have incorporated the 100 Book Challenge reading program designed to get our students reading. We are filling our classroom libraries with books that represent the interests of the students, reflect the diversity of our students, and expose them to cultures, perspectives, and experiences other than their own. With this in mind, we are curating a list of books by authors with a particular emphasis on the diversity that exists within our community. We also have ARC, which Mrs. Moretti mentioned, American Reading Company, coaches who work with teachers in their own classrooms as they learn to create the conditions necessary to establish an authentically engaging literary culture. Next slide. Our district has welcomed many students from other countries, and we are here to support them. The district has invested in resources listed on this slide to support our English language learners. We use the American Reading Resources Company, which includes ERLA, Multilingual Learner Guide, the toolkits, and leveled libraries. For standalone courses, specifically, we use Rosetta Stone, the English Foundation, and we've also partnered with Hudson Valley Auburn, the Regional Bilingual Educational Resource Network, to provide assistance to our English language learner educators. Next slide. Social studies education helps our students understand the world they live in so they can make informed decisions about issues affecting them. Students develop historical thinking and literacy as ways of navigating our world. We have invested in many of these resources that you see on the side, but particularly Discovery Education is a favorite, Newsella is a favorite to support curriculum development as we are currently auditing our text. We are providing teachers with support on the New York State U.S. History Regions Framework. In addition, our district is piloting the New York State Seal of Civic Readiness for others to follow. Next slide. For science department, we are increasing our student body enrollment in our elective courses by creating engaging and community-related studies. Therefore, we have invested in multiple resources, tech programs, and opportunities for teacher and community collaboration. Next slide, please. So one of the most rewarding aspects of human experience is our ability to connect with others. Being able to communicate with someone in their language is an incredible gift. We offer Spanish and Italian languages. We have purchased the e-version of our text, Realidades, which is Spanish, and Espresso Ragazzi, which is Italian. We have created foundation Spanish classes for our newcomers using ERLA and O'Neill as the main resource. Next slide. So this district, our students are very fortunate in this district to have a Korean technology education program that gives them what's needed to succeed in life. Technical skills, academic skills, employability skills. In addition, career and technical education helps students see what it's like. What is it that they're learning that applies to the needs of employers? Our division promotes professional development to help teachers keep current with job market demands. Next slide. Fine and performing arts provide our students with many benefits, such as promoting self-esteem, motivation, cultural exposure, creativity, improved emotional expression, as well as developing social skills and an appreciation of diversity. Our division has purchased musical instruments and fixed and tuned instruments, purchased marching band uniforms to promote pride and school spirit, provide teachers with professional development to research and include culturally rich musical texts, replenished art supplies. Through the efforts of our students, faculty, staff, and division, We are regionally and nationally recognized by the NAM Foundation for best communities for education. Next slide. Participation in high school athletics teaches kids the importance of movement and physical fitness. When these values are emphasized to students, it's much more likely that they will stick with these habits as they grow. Our division is updating curriculum for health and physical education. We support our athletic department. We've purchased uniforms and sports equipment. We provide our coaches with professional development around Policy 54. In addition to supporting professional development, we provide support with Policy 5411. And through the efforts of all, our students are excelling on and off the field. So before I turn this over to Mrs. Moriarty, one last thought. Our mission is to provide a quality education for each and every student. To that end, the district is committed to a continual process of curriculum review and improvement. In addition, providing teachers with resources and professional learning to support instruction in the classroom. Mrs. Moriarty?
Thank you, Ms. Soto. I know that was a lot of information, but we wanted to represent what students in K-12 are offered and what a day in the life of a student would look like. So that being said, this slide shows you our budget. Our total budget for curriculum instruction is $82,827,634. Of that $82 million, $79,084,779, $100, 96% of our budget goes to salaries. And not just salaries for curriculum instruction, but for exceptional learners as well. From assistant superintendents, directors, supervisors, clerical, all the supports that we offer to deliver high quality curriculum instruction across the district. What's left out of the 82 million is 4%, which is $3,742,855,000, which you can see represented in the next pie graph, what the expenditures are. So that $3 million is spent on textbooks, curriculum development, materials and supplies that we've mentioned throughout the presentation, equipment and equipment repair that might look like for instruments or other equipment that needs to be repaired, laptops, Chromebooks, club travel, standardized testing, translation services, and miscellaneous contracts. That's for vendors for additional PD, BOCES programs that we contract with to offer services, not only to students, but also to teachers for professional development. So that concludes our presentation.
Mr. Stridiron, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I do have a few questions. I'll just start with the first one. I know that with COVID coming back in person, that the students are having some difficulties, socialization and dealing with stress. Does the district have a K through 12 age appropriate conflict resolution program where the students can learn to deal with certain feelings that they're having so that they understand that acting out in certain ways is not productive and that they can deal with their stresses in more productive ways? I think it would benefit the students in the long run and make them, help them to become better able to deal with issues as they get older.
Mr. Forget, would you like to answer that part of Mr. Stridiron's questions?
We absolutely do. And to give you more in-depth information on that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Peterson and Mr. Bear. Mr. Regan has worked pretty hard working with the social workers, the psychologists, and the guidance counselors to do this. Ms. Peterson, want to start?
Sure. I think that that's a great question. We know that many of our students are adjusting to the pandemic. I know that as a part of Mr. Bear's presentation, he did review many of the aspects of the SEL and PPS plan around restorative practices, as well as just general SEL Tier 1 supports, as well as the further implementation of restorative practices. We do know that out of COVID, there have been some concerns that we do have to address, and that I know that Mr. Bear last week, and I'm going to ask him to speak to that. There has been an intentional effort to ensure that we have a program and staff to kind of help and assist address those needs. Mr. Bear?
Thank you. So as we've described, we've been focused based on the panorama data and providing those supports accordingly. So at the elementary level, we've talked about students who have emotional regulation, and we have been supporting the ruler program as well as Leader in Me. And we've introduced also the zones of regulation to help students identify their emotions and know strategies to address those. As Ms. Peterson said, at the secondary level, we've really started to enhance our programs around conflict resolution and the use of restorative practices. We have asked the board, and you've supported, having staff dedicated to that in all of our secondary schools. We'll begin to build out ways to do community circles as well as restorative meetings when students have had issues with their, whether it be peer conflicts, student to teacher conflicts, so forth and so forth. And as I've indicated in my Exceptional Learner Committee, we have tripled the number of social workers over the last 7 years to help support some of these endeavors.
So, Mr. Stridiron, before you ask your next question, because I know you said you had a few, I'm going to jump in and Mr. Howard, hang on to your question. Mr. Stridiron asked a really good question before about the number of teacher assistants in the primary grades. Are they back? Are we back at our pre-cut number?
They are not back in this current school year. There is a desire to increase the number of teaching assistants next year. Mrs. Moriarty and I have had that conversation indefinitely for first grade, increasing the number from, there are no teaching assistants currently in first grade, so moving teaching assistants into first grade next year, using some of the stimulus money to address exactly what Mr. Stridiron is sharing, not just the academic needs, but the social emotional learning needs. As we go into the numbers and the use of those dollars to support education, we'll continue to look at teaching assistants to increase it. But I also have to say, and this is a plea, we are in need of recruitment for teaching assistants. We are right now, we have openings for teaching assistants. If there are individuals in the community that would like to come, this is a public service announcement, please reach out. We need your help. Our teams are in need of teaching assistants. So we are recruiting as hard as we possibly can, but we still need more. The other thing we're looking at through the ARP money is to allow teachers to stay focused on classroom instruction more often than providing duties. So we're looking to bring back the cafeteria monitors. The cafeteria monitors are a great resource to us to build relationships with students during breakfast and lunch. And we're going to look to the individual schools to tap into parents that might want to do a short-time, part-time position and get paid for it. So we're expanding in that direction as well.
So thank you, Mr. Forget. Mr. Stridiron, how many more questions do you have? Because I'll call on you for one question and then we'll go to Mr. Howard and then I'll come back to you.
I have 3 others. Mr. Howard should go. Thank you.
Okay. And then Mr. Walker, I'll get to you. I see you waving. So Mr. Howard had his hand up first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Stridiron and Madam President. So my question is around the social SEL teams in the district. With the extra stimulus money that we have, is there any consideration to try to increase some of the social workers that we have in the district? Because right now, this is a very critical time, crucial time coming out of a pandemic. I'm going to say coming out because I don't know if we're going to revisit a pandemic, but on the tail end of this pandemic, the education loss that these children have suffered, a lot of it is related to their social emotional aspects of what we're dealing with in the buildings. And one thing that will continually say, if we don't address the SEL portion of the scholars, then the academic portion is not going to be what we want it to be. And I guess the question I'm trying to ask here is, do we have full SEL teams in every building? That would be a social worker, a psychologist, and are they specifically dedicated to that specific building? And also, I appreciate what Mr. Bayer said in regards, we tripled the number of psychologists, social workers in the district, but is there any way we can increase those numbers to ensure that we don't have heavy amounts of workloads on some of these individuals that are working with our scholars?
Ms. Peterson, I see your hand up to respond, and then Mr. Walker, I'll get to you.
Thank you, Madam President. We definitely understand, and I'll reiterate that we are concerned and we would like to make sure that our students are supported through this coming out of the pandemic, but also just in self-regulation, understanding how to express their emotions in an appropriate way within a school setting and also within our community. We have our students, but they're also the citizens that are within our community that we have to interact with society in a daily fashion. So teaching them those skills and abilities is a lifelong thing. So we are focused on trying to embed those and to make sure that our students have opportunities and that there's places within the curriculum to teach those skills. One thing that's important to note is that these skills can't just rely on one group of people. I think that the MTSS program that we're trying to embed and even SEL programs, you'll see those programs within the classroom. And we're trying to make sure that we have a widespread approach to this work, educating our teachers, educating our students around classroom management, as well as how they interact with one another, with adults, are lifelong important skills for any citizen. So that is a part of what restorative practices in the MTSS program are all about. I don't know if Mr. Baer wants to add to that response. I just wanted to say that.
So let me push in very quickly. The group that I was referring to, I neglected to say the counselors because it's a triage. It's psychologists, social workers, and counselors. So that's the group I'm referring to.
Yes, and they're a small group within if we think of a larger school community, they're kind of the experts on social emotional learning. However, we also have to prepare our school community to help prepare our students. And that is in the classroom, how they interact with each other in the classroom, how we are expressing when we are having a problem. We have to teach our students those skills so that when they do go into the larger society, they're able to conduct themselves if they're feeling an appropriate way, what supports are in their toolbox in order to cope. And we hope the programs like Leader in Me, like Ruler, like Zones of Regulation will help teach those skills, and that language of feeling and emotion can assist them in the future, as well as knowing that those emotions can sometimes lead to a behavior that is not positive. So those are the things that we're trying to embed.
Thank you. I'm going to get to Mr. Walker. Mr. Forget, can you hang on a second? Mr. Walker, you want to ask your question, please?
Yeah, two questions. First of all, thank you for your presentations. I understand and I see the investment that the district has put into the education of our students. But I need to know what data exists that proves that what our investment is worth it. Are these the best programs that we can get?
Mr. Forget?
Yeah, so we have quite a bit of data. We have data that was used to inform the decision for purchasing the American Reading Company literacy program. We are monitoring the impact that that's having through assessments and levels of students' performance. Ms. Moriarty, do you want to respond a little bit further to specifically the American Reading Company impact?
Sure. So as you heard earlier, we have the school pace data dashboard where teachers are regularly entering live data daily or almost, yeah, daily, depending on the group of students that they're working with. So we can monitor that way. What we've noticed most recently as we've started to implement our core in the primary grades is that the effect that we are seeing more students performing on grade level or 1 year below grade level. So we're able to identify through that data. But additionally, as we're implementing in grades 3 through 5 next year, we'll have a stronger hold on what that data shows.
Yeah,
It takes
so
time to implement a program and monitor the effectiveness of the program.
The other thing, Mr. Walker, is with the SEL work that's being done, the Panorama survey was implemented last year. It was implemented in September of this year, and it'll be implemented again at the end of this year to monitor the change in behavior patterns with the students as well. So we're monitoring through not just academic achievement, but social emotional learning achievement as well. It's the whole child.
Okay, I firmly believe in dealing with the whole child. But in terms of emotional regulation for students, has there also been any type of studies or classes for teachers and other employees of the district to make sure that they're number one, emotionally and socially regulated, and that they can recognize their own shortcomings in dealing with our children, because they have a big impact on our children. And I think that just saying that we're monitoring or helping children with their social regulation may not have that, might be a good thing, but maybe is not a total picture.
Mr. Bear, I see your hand up. Why don't you want to field that one?
Briefly, just so we're aware, the restorative practices are actually supported by the Justice Department because they recognize that it is a direct relationship to preventing students from being suspended and the prison, the school to prison pipeline. So the Justice Department actually has seen the efficacy of restorative practices and how they have a positive result. We are monitoring that, Mr. Walker, and our early indication, we are using it quite liberally at South Middle School. And we're already seeing that we've had a reduction in number of removals from classrooms, as well as the number of suspensions that's occurred in that building specifically. So we are collecting that data and we are seeing the early payoff of programs like we've described.
Thank you. But can I talk?
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, but I don't think my question was sufficiently answered. Are there programs or evaluations in place to make sure that our staff isn't contributing to a reduction in this emotional regulation?
Mr. Forget, you want to handle that one?
I guess not as targeted in the way that I hear Mr. Walker asking us to consider, and I think that's something that we would have to explore. I can tell you that there are courses that are offered by the Teacher Center that teachers are engaging in, and then they are providing feedback on the impact that that's having on their teacher practice. I think it's something we have to further explore to get deeper into what you're saying, Mr. Walker. I don't think we're doing what you're asking us to do, just to be very honest with you.
I think that further exploration is extremely important, because I feel from what I'm hearing from parents and from students is that it's not enough, and there has to be some type of to regulate our students. There's some adults who need that same regulation. Thank you.
I'm going to go back to Mr. Stridarn. I didn't forget you. And then Mr. Howard, I'll call on you, and Dr. Roman, you too. So just hang on. Go ahead, Mr. Stridarn.
Thank you, Madam President. So the other question I had was, I know that there's coding classes at the high school level. I'm not sure if it qualifies as a math or a science, but can we get coding at the elementary and the middle school levels, where they can teach the programming languages and Python or whatever is appropriate for that the age level, because I think it would really help some of the students to be able to be ready for the next level of automation that's going to be happening over the next 10 years. It could be part of the CTE program when they get older, as far as coding, robotics, and the like. Do we have anything like that in the pipeline?
Mrs. Moriarty, Ms. Soto, can you respond, or Ms. Peterson? How about you, Ms. Peterson? Your hand's up. Go ahead. Go.
I'm a sucker for current college readiness. So when I hear Mr. Sharon say coding and all those other things, those opportunities, I know we explore, and I know that they're in the process now of surveying and trying to get courses together for our Empire program and other programs during our extended year planning, 21st century. So that's definitely something. I know that career and college readiness and preparing our students for life beyond the academy field, and that is a field that we desperately need in this country. So I know that we're in the process, and embedding it within our school day would be something that we would definitely explore.
Mr. Stradern, do you have another question? And then I'll go to Mr. Howard.
Yes, I mean, just follow up. I would like to see it at the elementary level, middle school level, not just the high school. And then on one of the slides, they presented a picture of the planetarium at the high school. It's been a kind of a touchy issue with me for many years. What exactly are we using the planetarium for? And will this budget finally address many of the issues with the state of the planetarium? Are we going to fully invest in the planetarium to bring it up to modern standards so we can use it as a teaching tool?
So I can start that. Mr. Romano is all over this, Mr. Stridiron. He's assessed it. He's got prices. He is ready to bring back the planetarium. So we're starting to do some of that work, and I'm going to throw this to Ms. Soto, who can give you more in depth as to the plans to bring that back.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. So yes, Mr. Romano has created a proposal to try and bring back the planetarium. I did visit the planetarium when I was there. It's a beautiful space. We do utilize the planetarium for some of the courses, but it's not functioning from what I understand the way we used to use it. That is why Mr. Romano has created a proposal for our team to review.
Mr. Stradern, do you have any more questions? Because I've got other people in the queue.
Yeah,
so.
the last one is I agree with the teaching assistants need to be brought back to the levels that we had years ago, because if you want to make the biggest impact on K-2 with reading and math, to get a good start with their educational careers, to have extra help in the classroom would be beneficial. So if we could possibly address it in this budget, K-2 teaching assistants back to previous levels, and we can get the budget where we do line by line, I would love to be able to read that and try to come up with ways to find funding for that. Thank you.
I agree, Mr. Stradern, and to find people to fill those slots too. So yeah, I agree. Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. I think this is a great time, great presentation, Ms. Moriarty, your team. But are there any conversations being had about revisiting the SAVE classrooms at the elementary level? I mean, understanding that we're talking about coming out of the pandemic, we're talking about some of the behavior issues of some of the youngsters at an early age, and when we're taking the kids out of the classroom, is there an opportunity for us to revisit the SAVE classroom conversation and have it around academics, behavior, and the social and emotional aspect of the scholars, where we can address all three, because there's a heavy conversation that's been going on a few of the committees that I've been on. And I'm curious, are we going to entertain that idea of revisiting the saved classrooms at the elementary levels?
So Ms. Maneo, can I call on Dr. Roman to respond to that, since he's got a question as well? So we
Sure.
with one stone. Go ahead, Dr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. Forget, Madam President. Mr. Howard, in terms of your question, that's something that we've been grappling with in the SAVE committee. What we've done is we have come up with some characteristics of what it would look like to continue the education when a student is removed from the classroom, as well as what does it mean to provide the necessary social emotional supports, because we know that when students are in a sense of crisis, it takes them at least 90 minutes for them to at least calm down and get refocused. So those conversations have to continue. And I think that that's something that, is one of the areas that we had targeted in terms of providing supports for students through the federal funds that have been allocated for our district. But again, it still requires some unpacking, because we certainly don't want to do the same thing in terms of, just having a save room where their needs are not going to be addressed. And that's really key. We want to make sure that the needs are addressed, the social emotional needs are addressed, while at the same time providing the academic support so that recidivism goes down. We don't want to continue seeing students being sent out of the classroom.
That is correct. And that was part of the conversation that we did have on the SAVE committee. And we talked about addressing the academic, the social emotional side, and the behavior aspects of the scholar. And I think that this is the time to have that conversation during budget season, and understanding what that cost would be and what that looks like, because we've had conversations on the SAVE committee in regards to what does that look like? What is it? Is it a teacher? Is it a social worker? Is it and we talked about a hybrid model. So it's going to cost funds. And I think it's something that we really need to talk about and really have some serious conversation around, because it's too much academic loss being had by these students when they're removed from the classroom.
Thank you. Dr. Roman, do you have a question? Mr. Walker, I see your hand, but Mrs. Burton's going to go first. Dr. Roman, do you have a comment?
Yes, Madam President. I just wanted to just acknowledge the work that the district is doing with regards to the question that Mr. Walker had presented in terms of how do we build the capacity of our educators in the classroom so that they can better support the needs of our students. And we all know that people do the best that they can with what they know. Last year, the district supported the work of Dr. Holly in the district so that we can actually address the skill set and the mindset of this work around cultural responsiveness. And that work was started with human resources. This year, we collaborated between multiple divisions so that we can now address classroom management with a cultural responsive lens. And that's going to be taking place later on this year. And so because we've been working collaboratively among different divisions, that work is going to continue as we move forward. So I just wanted to just acknowledge that.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Burton.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. So there's a lot happening right now. There's a lot of really rich conversation that we're having now in a board meeting. And, I wonder a couple of things. Number one, I wonder if we're having these conversations, these open and honest conversations in our schools, in our classrooms, in our teacher, rooms where, they're ongoing, but they're also being addressed. And I know that's not a question. I'm just always curious in terms of how does this all end up and how does it show up in a classroom? So when I look at this P12 curriculum and instruction initiatives, some of these initiatives are not new. We've had quite a few of them for years. And my question is, when we have initiatives that we have been implementing for years. I would think, and I might be wrong, that we have some experts who do it and do it very well. And are we looking at best practices? Are we looking at best practices and showcasing those best practices to, and Dr. Roman just talked about, skill sets and mindsets of our educators. And are we documenting those best practices that really truly work? And they work not just in terms of the implementation of these initiatives, but are we looking at are we actually really looking at the mindset of those folk who are also doing the work? Because mindset is a big one. Mindset is a big one. Microaggressions are real. Okay, they show up even in the best of scenarios. And are we comfortable enough where we have educators who are really doing the work very well? Are they feeling comfortable enough to, and just for a better term, call other folk out? Okay, and not in a way that is mean-spirited, but I think, when do we get to a point where we can identify what is not working very well and get to a point where we hold those folk accountable? And so, we look at the data, the school districts, our data, in terms of particularly students of color. We can blame COVID. Yes, there's been a lot of lost opportunities and learning loss. Okay, but the data has not tremendously changed through the decades. And so when we look at data and we look at the initiatives, and I'm even in my brain, I'm hearing, students, and I'm wondering, are those students, Black and brown students? Okay, are they Black and brown students? And how do we get to a point where we can openly, honestly hold everyone accountable? I mean, this is about accountability. We're looking at over $300 million budget. We're looking at, we just went through the cost of curriculum instruction. We're looking at a lot of monies that flow through a system that is failing particular kids. And they tend to be Black and brown kids. They tend to be kids that are coming from impoverished environments. And until we can get to the actual root causes, I think, we just keep on saying what we're doing, but as Mr. Walker said, how well are we doing it? And are we doing it in a systematic, we say data-informed manner, and are we really, really nipping it as we go along? And first of all, it begins, I hear, all of this seems to be on the back of our school district. And I would say it's not all the school district's responsibility, but it seems to me what I'm hearing is, oh my goodness, all of this is on the school district's back. And where are our parents? Where are our, and I know we had a conversation about community agencies, but we're not even sharing information. We're not even sharing real data. We can sit around a table and continue to talk about what we're doing, but until we really start sharing data, we'll continue to operate in silos. There's a lot of money that flows through the city of Newburgh because of poverty. A lot of money, a lot of programs, and yet we still seem to continue to have this same conversation day in, day out, year after year, decade after decade. And, for me, I say hooray for all of these initiatives. But until the data really starts shifting and until we really get to a point where we're holding everybody accountable, and not accountable in the sense that, you know, folk are going to lose their jobs, but accountable in the sense that we're very clear on what we really mean by our priorities. Because where we stand now, I don't see much of, you know, too much movement when we really stop and look at our state data. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. I'm going to let Mr. Forget kind of jump in and kind of.
I go on and on.
So yeah, thank you, Ms. Burton. And I think, you know, it's going to take us a little time to unpack a lot of what you said, because you had a lot to say, and it's really critical information. But one approach that I do want to say, I'm pretty confident that's working is, and there are things happening that are positive across the school district. I'm just going to share one that may help you to understand that the way we're addressing it, and that's at Meadow Hill School. At Meadow Hill School, we have what's called the Professional Learning Walk Cycle, where they're introducing a strategy or an intervention. They're training the faculty and staff on that intervention. The staff is implementing it. The administrators are working with the teachers to observe it. They're determining how well it's being implemented. They're coming back to the faculty meeting and sharing that information. Individuals that have mastered that are sharing the way they mastered it and are sharing it with other colleagues, truly in a professional learning situation in a PLC model. And then they determine whether they are ready to address another initiative or go another round to make sure we get this solid. And they're looking at how well it's making an impact. And Mr. Prakash is leading that with his administration. That's one way that we're starting to turn by getting protocols and procedures in place that lead us to get to where you're looking. And I will share with you that Ms. Peterson and I have had some conversations around the roles and responsibilities of senior staff members. We're ready to make some shifts and adjustments, and we'll be prepared to share that with you either at the next meeting or the first meeting in April, that really get to using data to not just talk about the opportunity gaps for students based on race, ethnicity, based on disability status or English language learner status or poverty, but how we're going to attack that data with specific interventions and support teachers on how to use the data to inform the instructional changes they need to make or they want to make. So we've got a lot coming. We just want to kind of package it out and we'll address all of the things that you just shared.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. Mr. Walker, I didn't forget you.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to take 30 seconds to say that as long as teachers are constantly told and supported that they are the adult in the room, our children will rise to the standard of what we expect from them. The adult that I was when I first taught at 22 was certainly different from the adult that I was when I retired at 63. I learned from my students, from some of the things I did that I was embarrassed. I embarrassed myself by, from my ignorance, but I grew. And I think that if we let our teachers know that we expect them to grow as well, and we show them how to do it, that they can become better adults in the room, first of all, as role models. Not to be punished because they didn't do what we claim they were supposed to do because of their lack of being a role model, but to understand the importance of being a role model, particularly in our district, which demands a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. That was really a good statement. Thank you. Mr. Forget, I see no more hands. So where are you?
Thank you, Madam President. I am right here. I have I really appreciate that conversation. It was really meaningful for senior staff to hear and engage in a dialogue, talking about students, talking about kids, talking about learning, talking about our Newburgh population. So really appreciate and hope we can continue those conversations. That concludes our items.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. We're going to move on to our board committees. We're going to start with Policy Committee and Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. Policy Committee met on March 3rd, and we had a very spirited discussion around Policy 5411, which is coming before the board this evening for reading and passing, reading and to be voted on, I'm sorry. So there's going to be questions around that. On the committee level, we had some very honest conversation, and I'm expecting some this evening also. So I look forward to it. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. We're going to move on to Exceptional Learners Committee. Ms. Burton.
Thank you, Madam President. Exceptional Learners Committee, we met on March 2nd, 2022. There is one resolution for the board's consideration in terms of authorization for funds to implement educational programs and services. Additionally, we discussed curriculum writing for the New York State Alternative Assessment. We looked at pupil personnel 7-year staffing trends, and we received, as we always do, an update on our Committee on Preschool Education and also CSEA Committee on Special Ed. But the good news is, lastly, we heard a really great presentation, which this has been a continuum, to spotlight related services and staffers who are working diligently behind the scenes. And so this week, actually this week is March 6th to the 12th, is National School Social Workers Week. And we had a wonderful, wonderful presentation that gave us a deeper understanding of the role and responsibilities of social workers here in our district. And I want to thank all of our social workers who are the link between our scholars, academic and social successes. And I want to applaud their expertise, their passion, and their commitment as therapeutic clinicians, mental health providers, and community, family, and school liaisons. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. That was really nice. Thank you. Curriculum and Instruction Committee, Mrs. Maida.
Thank you, Madam President. We met on March 2nd, and we have several resolutions that you'll see on the agenda this evening. This is dovetailed off all of the conversation, but we had an excellent presentation during Curriculum and Instruction discussing iReady data, mid-year iReady data. And this data was presented to us. So we, as a committee, we made a conscious decision to have another more in-depth conversation, not just looking at data, but really diving into our ELA and math curriculum to look at, to use that data to inform instruction. So it's interesting, but once again, we're all on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Maida. Audit and Finance Committee, Mr. Levinstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So the Audit and Finance Committee met at 5 p.m. tonight, and we discussed the resolutions 8.1 through 8.6 on tonight's finance agenda. And we also discussed with Ms. Peterson a grant that was awarded to the district of $2.1 million from the Emergency Connectivity Fund, which is going to be used to purchase 3,500 Chromebooks to aid our refresh program for our scholars' Chromebooks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levinstein. And I really like that project that, Ms. Peterson was talking about. That sounded really good. So right now, before we go into my section, it is 9:09. We're going to take a Mineo minute so everybody can get up and stretch. We will be back at 9:11. Everybody, 9:11.
We're ready whenever you are, ma'am.
Thank you. We're going to start with my section, and I'm going to start with a brief comments about the superintendent search. So I'd like to give you a brief update on the superintendent search. During the President's Week, Hazard, Young, and Altiette, HYA, our search consultants, met with every single board member. We gave input on what characteristics that we thought our new superintendent should have. Central office staff and other school district groups are meeting with HYA this week. And at this time, HYA is conducting virtual focus groups. They will use the same questions that they asked the board. You can get information or participate in the survey by visiting the Newburgh and Lawrence City School District website. It's in English and Spanish, so anyone can give input until March 11. And I really would like everybody to give input on that website. So thank you. So I have one resolution, and that's the resolution to adopt policy on the first read, number 5411, participation in student extracurricular activities and interscholastic athletics. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions and or discussion? Mr. Stridarn.
Could someone explain what the major change is from the policy that was tabled at the last meeting?
Mr. Forget?
Sure. Correct me if let me defer to Ms. Peterson. She's running policy now. I'm not doing it, but I support what you're going to hear from Ms. Peterson.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ms. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam President. We brought 5411 based on the board's recommendations last time back to policy committee and had a discussion around the appeals process as well as clarity for staff and for coaches and expectations for students. The policy committee and Mrs. Soto and Mr. Harrison and Dr. Jager and Linda Keach have been working really hard to come up with a policy that we can enforce and also communicate to parents, as well as a method by which we reach out to the community about what the policy is. After consideration about the policy, we did for this year clarify what the appeal process would be for next year. It's based on academic performance. We felt that it was very important for students to have an academic standard. And if they are struggling academically, we like for them to participate in many of our support programs. We have an evening high school as well as credit recovery and offerings through our extended year programs. If they're academically not performing, we would like for them to participate, but we felt strongly that the 85% attendance was important to uphold.
Thank you. Mr. Levinstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So I feel the policy is heading in the correct direction, except for the removal of the appeal process for attendance issues. So I will be voting no on it. But a larger concern of mine is this. There's a process where coaches, the athletic director, fine and performing arts teachers, and the director of fine and performing arts will be involved on a daily basis confirming student eligibility. So they will work all year to make sure the students are aware and follow the regulations to prepare for future games and events. And that is all well and good. My concern is, what about the other students? What about the students who are not athletes and who are not performers and do not have a director looking over their daily attendance rates, that do not have coaches or advisors saying, hey, you need to, you can't miss any days. You have to get all this information in, or whatever it is, in reference to attendance. So that's my concern about the majority of the students that don't have these supports built in. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Forget, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Manal. Those are, every student in this district is important to us, Mr. Levenstein. And at the secondary level, there is a process in place on a quarterly basis to observe and take a look at the data as to who the students are that are struggling. And the principals work very closely in their cohort teams with their 2 assistant principals that are assigned to that cohort specifically at Maine, and the guidance counselor and social worker and the shared psychologist assigned to that team. And they go through the data and they figure out who are the students that are struggling. And our counselors work pretty hard to figure out how to support those kids and identify them and move forward. So we do look at the students that are in the greatest need, and we do have a good to go system at the high school level that's set up for that. We also have structures in place at the elementary and middle level. We review attendance with the principals at Datacom, and we talk about what interventions they have put in place. And I think we've grown tremendously with this. And I'll turn this to Ms. Peterson to speak a little bit further on what we've done around tracking and monitoring performance as well as attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. We know student intervention and supports is the best way that we can get them to cross academy field. Meeting with the cohort leaders, Mrs. Soto, as well as Mr. Glasgow and Mr. Dotto, work with their teams in building to try to address student support in general. We all know that there's always more work to be done in clarifying that system and bringing more support around it. We also look at some of the instructional needs, because sometimes it's students, but it's also just making sure the curriculum and instruction that is offered to them is aligned with what the expectations are for CNI. So these meetings do happen. We have them quarterly as well as at August report time to review the data and attendance. We also have social workers and attendance aides supporting when we have students that are not attending on a regular basis, and reviewing attendance and attendance expectations for students.
I understand that, but if I can just make one comment, please. We can have a student who's not failing and who's coming to class this year and not be able to participate because he didn't come to school 85% of the time last year. And I don't know what interventions would be needed or proposed by a principal to a student that was passing all his classes, doing well, and coming to school regularly in the current year. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Howard, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted I raised my hand to assure the board members that was the reason that it was brought back to committee, and all the questions that were asked and explained were addressed. Ms. Maida and myself, we asked many questions of the central staff, and our concern was, not just putting resources and things in place, but how will the kids know that these resources will be available to them? And I also walked them through, what does it look like if a student is failing? What is the process to ensure that they are made aware of the night school, made aware of credit recovery, made aware of summer school, made aware of these things that are going to help keep them eligible? And as they just spoke to us in regards to that, they answered some of those questions, but it was also an opportunity to really address all the students, like Mr. Levenstein said. And our concerns was that, we spoke about the athletes, we spoke about the students that are performing arts, but we also were concerned about every student. What about the students who don't participate in those activities, like you said? And as Mr. Forget explained, that it's about all students, and that the guidance counselors, that the administrators, the teachers, everybody would be taking a role in this. So I just wanted to share that with you. Those questions were asked. That was the whole purpose of bringing it back to committee, to get clarifications on those things. And the example that you did use in regards to the individual from last year, I had spoke to Mr. Forget in regards to that, and they said that there was going to be opportunities for situations like that to be addressed. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Forger.
So I just want to clarify on what I heard Mr. Stringer say. He used the example of a student who had below 85% attendance in this current year. But next year, if we look to the future, gets together and gets himself on track and begins to move forward in a real positive way. I think what we have to do, Mr. Levenstein, is to understand that there's an average daily attendance requirement by the New York State Public High School Athletic Association that mandates that the student during season maintains the 85% attendance. What we're addressing through this policy is the postseason, and where we see students start to drop off in their attendance is postseason. And holding to an 85% standard, I think, is fair, because 85% is telling us that that student does not have to be seated for instruction for 27 days out of 180. That's a lot of time for a student to miss instruction. So I have to stand my ground on this as your interim superintendent and say, I believe 85% attendance is a standard that we have to uphold. And I don't believe that we should lessen that or decrease that. We have to get these students in instruction. We have to improve the graduation rate. We have to close this gap, and we have to focus on instruction in order for them to have these opportunities.
Thank you. Mrs. Burton?
So my question is, some of these students, they're emerging from the community. Okay, so we have AAUs going on, we have basketball programs going on, we have other sports going on within the community. Why not reach out to them and begin to work with them to find out how their students are doing? We have Little League, we have, Pop Warner football. These are young people who will eventually want to, if they have the skill set, to play on high school level. If not, then they certainly will have some athleticism, although they may not have the scholarly background. So why not reach out to these programs, and why not begin to work with them in terms of some expectations? And I'm not suggesting that with some of the AAU teams that they implement an attendance policy, but I think certainly it's worth having a conversation so that we can instill academic rigor much earlier, so that, my hope is that we wouldn't even need this policy, because they'll already be academically in tune, and they'll know the expectations once they get, to this level. But I certainly think it's worth a conversation. Basketball is up and running. Mr. Howard, he's over at the Armory. They're playing basketball over there. Are they also instilling, an academic requirement? Or are those coaches even talking about an academic requirement? And if coaches are that important, and they are, they can shift a young person. If a young person really wants to play basketball or whatever sport, a good coach will want to also work with the whole child, right? And if that's what we're talking about, let's talk about it with everyone, not just within the school district. Thank you.
Ms. Peterson, do you want to respond to that, or do you have something else to say?
Yes, Madam President. That is something that during policy committee, we also spoke about at length, is that we do need to get into the community so everyone has a clear expectation. Mr. Howard brought up the need to make sure that we are also explaining that, and that is something that we have also tasked our communication department with, to make sure that we do have these outreaches to the municipalities and also sports programs within the community to explain the policy and also reinforce it so that we do have clear expectations for all of our students.
Thank you. Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. So Mr. Forget said something important before. He said that the 85% attendance rate was something that he would like to hold, which is, I think it's good. I mean, we used to be with a higher rate, but 85 is the lowest that I would ever go. But as far as his statement, we want to increase the graduation rates. With this current policy, lowering the standard to 3.5 credits per year, that would put a student on a little over 6 years in high school at 3.5 credits per year to get to graduation. And I think that's really lowering the bar. I understand you're going to have the student participate in after school programs or night school or some kind of intervention. But what kind of a message are we sending our young people that as long as they take 6 years to graduate high school, they can participate in an after school or activities? I think it takes the whole point of what we're doing here is education. And I understand sports are a big part of the social and emotional framework of a student. But to say 6 years is acceptable for high school, they're going to be so far behind their peers educationally that I think it sends the wrong message. And I'd like to hear what Mr. Forget thinks about that.
Mr. Forget?
Thank you, Mr. Stridiron. So what we've done is we still hold the 4.5 credit. And if you remember, 4.5 credit still doesn't get that student graduation in 4 years. We're still 1 credit shy for each year. So we would have some making up to do at the 4.5. So reducing it to 3.5 is still a concern. But what we thought in this particular opportunity to give a student the chance to appeal is the only way they can appeal with 3.5 credits is that they are demonstrating an attempt to really engage, connect, and learn that material. They would have had to take a part in those resources that we provide, whether it's during credit recovery, an extended day, an extended year program. They have to demonstrate that they are actively trying to get through this curriculum to learn these standards. And there are some students where it will take 6 years, Mr. Stridiron, which is why we have a 6-year graduation rate now. We have a 4, a 5, and a 6-year graduation rate that's calculated out by the state education department. Not every student can do it in 4 years. Some will take 6 years to do it. And we need to honor that. As long as they're connected, engaged, and attempting to learn the information, I think we have to give them that opportunity, which is why we reduced it and held it to 3.5. If a student drops below that, they should not have the opportunity to appeal because we need to do more intensive support for them in the classroom. So we were trying to find that middle ground, but I do understand what you're saying.
Who makes the decision to have the appeal granted?
The principals of the building will, based on the criteria that we provide them in the policy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Walker, I see your hand, but I'm going to call on Mr. Howard first. He had his hand up first. Mr. Howard, you're muted.
Thank you, Madam President. I think this conversation is very disturbing to me, and I'm going to tell you why. I agree with standards. We've got to have academic standards, and I think that's what we're trying to do with this policy. But my concern is when we talk about this policy, the same voices that are talking about how to prevent a kid from, or a student or a scholar from being academically eligible or eligible to play or eligible to participate in the drama courses or the programs or the acting courses, we're the same voices when we see those ELA math scores, those ELA scores and math scores of kids of color at an early age, when we should be, that's when we should be in an uproar about those numbers. When we're talking about 86% of a cohort, 1 grade or 2 grades or 3 grades below grade level, those is when we should be having those conversations, because if we have it there, we won't be where we're at right now at the high school level with kids not academically eligible or kids not performing at the standards that they should be performing on. We should be in an uproar about the ELA and math scores when they present those scores and they show 86% of a cohort 1, 2, or 3 grades below. That's what we should be having those conversations. That's what should be talking about. How do we fix that? Because if we fix that, we would not be here having this conversation about policy and eligibility. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for your passion, Mr. Howard. Mr. Walker.
Yes, to pick up what Mr. Howard said, I think it goes right back to the point that if we have so many students that are excelling and coming to school to play a sport or be in a play or whatever, we can also use that desire to flip them in the classroom. As such, I think that we as a district may need to work on continually telling our students how great they can be and not to settle for the niche that they have decided to put themselves in to be safe, to feel like they are somebody. We can put that message out in every classroom and watch them grow. And that's part of what message are we going to send to our kids? Because right now what I'm hearing is, well, we tell you how to do this, we tell you how to do that. If you don't do it, then fine. All right, that's one way to look at it. But some of our kids, be they black, white, brown, whatever, have been punished and they're used to it. Let's try to flip it. Thank you.
Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. I actually think that's the first time that I've been accused of being silent on an issue. So for 8 years, I've been not silent about state test scores, not just for students of color, but for every student in our district. Unfortunately, I've been in the minority for voting for 8 years, and my views have not been voted in, and the views of the majority have been. And we're still here 8 years later, dealing with 14% of our students being at or above grade level. So hopefully we will turn the corner, and Mr. Howard and I and the other board members will work together to ensure that all students are passing and above grade level in reading, in math, in every subject, so we can make this district the best district in the entire state and the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. I see your hand, Mr. Walker. Hang on.
Thank you, Madam President. Once again, Mr. Stridiron, I was not referring to you. I was talking about we as a district should be in an uproar. Central administration should be in an uproar. We as a community, we as a district. It has nothing to do with you personally.
Thank you. Mr. Walker?
Okay, I'll make this short. I think that, number one, the last meeting or such, someone said that it would be a good idea to have a person come in and give us our own report card, independent of what the state says. I think we need to do that. I think too that we as a district, teachers and everyone else may suffer from the fact that we have lost confidence in ourselves, and that we, knowing who our kids are the best teachers and the best remedies for them. If we decide that's what we're going to do, instead of just try to make some state marker. The state doesn't know us. We know us. This community that I lived in for the last 30-odd years, we know each other. And we can make it work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I see no more hands or no more comments on this. So roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson,
No.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
No.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Maneo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
No.
Mr. Walker,
No.
Ms. Burton.
No.
That item fails.
Thank you. Sorry, we're going to move on to the next item, and this is a discussion, and then we'll follow the discussion by a poll of the board. And the discussion is going to be surround the concept of in-person meetings. And Mr. Levinstein, I'm going to put you on the hot seat and call on you first and get your thoughts about this.
Thank you. So my thoughts are that as we have asked all the employees to come back a while ago, all the kids to come back, everyone can be unmasked. I think the minimum we should be doing in-person meetings is for all the full board meetings, whether it's the regular meetings or special meetings that involve the full board. I think there should be public in-person meetings. And if you want to leave committee meetings for now and see how this goes, or you want to leave it up to the committees or the liaison from central office, that's fine. But I think at least the full board meetings should be in person. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Forget, can I ask you a question? Do we have enough room and space to space people out, give a little distance between people in the board conference room?
In the board auditorium? Yes.
Mhm. Cool. Okay. Anybody else? Comments? Mr. Walker and then Mr. Stridiron.
Yes, being a member of the high-risk age group, I'd like to know if there's a possibility that we could do both. You know, have an open meeting, and a person like myself who might feel uncomfortable could still participate through Zoom. Thank you.
I don't know how to answer that, Mr. Walker. Mr. Shaw, can that be done?
Yes, it can. Historically, it could be done, and it can be done in the future. It would be this way. You would have an open meeting, and you would have board members who are remote appearing so that their image could be seen by those seated in the audience. The one difference is the way the open meetings law is written now, their location would have to be part of the public notice of the meeting. But they could participate in the executive session, in the open meeting, deliberate and vote.
So that we could say we're going to have an open meeting, and then somebody, for example, Mr. Walker, could say that he would like to do it remotely. That's a possibility.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Stridiron.
Just to follow up what Mr. Shaw said, wouldn't that board member have to be in a public place as we did in the past?
Well, the difficulty is if they're sitting in their home, where does the public that's allowed to be quote unquote with them get to stay? Is the board member behind the screen door and the public is seated on the porch? That's the problem with it. And it may be that this law will change so that that public presence at the location of the remote board member might change. In my opinion, it should, but the way the law is written now, not so.
And I thought it was suspended that you had to say where you were. You know, you had to give the address of where you were when you were attending the meeting remotely. I thought that was suspended.
Well, for the suspension of the open meetings law requirement for having an in-person meeting, the virtual meeting suspended it. They haven't gotten around yet to legislate the other aspect that I just addressed.
Thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted you, Mr. Stridiron. Go ahead.
No, it's a good point. But I do agree with Mr. Levinstein that The board meetings should be in person. They should be live streamed as well. But the committee meetings, I think it's working fairly well with the virtual because we get to see the presentations on the screen. I would like to know if anybody from the public views them. Do we have a count on YouTube from views of those meetings?
I thought those were all Zoom meetings. I don't know if that, I don't have a count on that. Can anybody help with that? On the
I can get the
committee?
count for you on that. But once they make that Zoom link public, then there's a count on how many people watched it. I can look those up.
Are there more than like 2 or 3 people that view it, do you think, Mr. McCoy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's more than 2 or 3, definitely.
Well, that's more than we had when it was in person, right?
Yeah, so I would like to continue the committee meetings virtually if it's allowed by law.
And right now it is until the emergency is lifted, okay? So anybody else have any comments? Mr. Levins?
Thank you. I just want to ask Mr. Shaw a question because few years ago, Mr. Lawson did a lot of traveling and he would Zoom in from where he was staying and he gave the address, like you said, and he participated in executive meetings, but I thought he couldn't vote remotely. Am I incorrect in that?
Yes, that's incorrect. He had the right to vote.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so are there any more questions or comments on this item? So, Mr. McCoy, can you poll the board on their feelings about having board meetings or board special meetings in public? And I'm not going to talk about committee meetings because we're still going to leave them virtual at this point.
Okay, so a yes means you want to be in public.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Abstain.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes, but I would like to have the flexibility for board members to Zoom in for their own particular reasons. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you. Is everybody in agreement? And we'll poll the board again on having committee meetings virtual. Mr. McCoy, can you poll the board, please?
Virtual committees, Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Ms. Green. Sorry, Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for the good discussion. And that ends my section. We're going to go on to our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Secondary, Mrs. Soto.
Thank you, Madam President. The Arts Division presents to you consent agenda items 6.1 through 6.4 for the board members' consideration and consent.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So
Second.
Questions or discussion on these items? Roll call, Mr. Clerk. Oh,
Ms.
sorry,
Maida?
wait. I see Ms. Burton's hand. Go ahead, Ms. Burton, ask your question.
So never mind. Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Ms. Green, sorry, Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinson.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Soto. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Exceptional Learners, Mr. Bayer.
Thank you, Madam President. The Exceptional Learner Division has one item for the board's consideration, recommendations from the CSE and CPSE committee.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. Bayer. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Mr. Goldbeck.
Not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Oh,
sir.
great. Okay. I love.
No, now we can't.
Tonight, we're presenting items 8.1 through 8.6 for board consideration as consent items.
Thank you. Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Mr. Stridiron.
8.6, please.
8.6, okay. Any others? I'd like to entertain a motion on 8.1 through 8.5, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on those items? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo.
Yes. Let's move on to item 8.6, please. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Yes, Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. I just had a quick question. Since the company that's being hired to do the inspections is the same company that worked on the plans for the CTE building, wouldn't that be a conflict of interest?
Mr. Shaw, can you help us with that?
It's not a legally cognizable conflict of interest. It's a question of interest.
I'm just concerned that why would they, I mean, it's hard to say this, but it's just one of those things where if I am hired as a professional to inspect something that I have worked on myself, I've always been told that that would be a conflict of interest. I shouldn't work on the projects that I've helped design.
Miss,
These are,
When it, if I may, when
explain
it
a
comes,
little bit. Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, when it comes to conflicts of interest, the particular provisions are in the general municipal law, and it doesn't address it from that vantage point.
Mr. Howard.
I gotta say it. I agree with Mr. Stridiron here. I understand not clear conflict, but there is a smell test there, and I'm not casting any aspersions, but the way he explained it is very solid. It's like you're doing the work, then you're doing the inspection on the work that you were a part of. So I agree with him on this one.
Any other questions or comments on this? Mr. Levinstein.
So is it inspections or is it just data collection?
I would say it's better qualified as data collection. The state requires us to make sure that we're doing everything possible to measure possible stormwater pollution and do what we can to prevent. we're allowed to self-police that. That's done generally by the designer and the contractor on the job. It's to conform to DEC regulations. That's the reason for this. DEC can show up at any time and ask for the most recent assessment of that. Those need to be done daily. And if they're not, if we're out of date on it, we can be heavily fined. So it makes really the most sense in a certain way to have people who are going to be on site anyway to do those inspections for us.
Mr. Howard?
Yes, so Madam President, would it not behoove us to remove any type of anticipated improprieties to change someone other than them to do this type of a work, just to CYA down the line?
I didn't hear the question if it was addressed to me. I don't know who you addressed it to. I'm sorry, I'm having very wonky internet right now.
So, my question was, would it behoove us as a district to try to get someone else other than the individuals working on the site to do this type of data work, to remove any visual or any idea of improprieties? Not to say that anything will be done, but just to remove that from anywhere down, being questioned about that down the line?
I guess that would be up to the board if you wanted to do it that way.
I'm going to call on Ms. Peterson. You have a comment on that one?
I know that this testing that is being done is required, as Mr. Golbeck said, by the DEC. The contractors are on site daily, and they can do this collection and submit it to the lab as required. So I know that it may seem, but it may also increase the cost of the service if we do decide to go with a separate vendor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. So the first paragraph of the proposal, it says here, thank you for the opportunity to submit the following proposal to provide professional services to perform inspections of the stormwater pollution prevention measures. So, and it looks like it did go out to bid because there was another company here that submitted a proposal. So is this something that's needed literally right away? Or when is this supposed to start?
As it's supposed to start as soon as the work begins.
And when does that begin?
Well, I think, let me see what we have as far as dates are concerned. Well, the dates that they gave us are September 22nd, 2021 through March 30th, 2026. So my assumption is
they've been working on this for
that
6 months.
They've been doing these inspections throughout. Yeah, that's my
Have they been
assumption.
paid?
No, they have not. Not
without
for
a
this work,
contract?
not for this work. No.
It's highly unusual.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk, on 8.6.
Mr. Walker,
No.
Ms. Burton,
No.
Dr. Henderson,
No.
Mr. Howard,
No.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron.
No.
That item fails.
Thank you. Mr. Golbeck, are you finished with your items?
Yes, that concludes my items for this evening, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items, excuse me, I have items 9.1 through 9.14 for your consideration on tonight.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Mrs. Burton,
9.4, please.
any others? Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion on all but 9.4. Anybody, a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second that.
Thank you. Questions or discussion on those items? Mr. Levinstein?
Thank you, Madam President. So I have a question regarding 9.9 and 9.10. 9.9 traditionally has been all the coaches that are, whether they're from modified or freshman, JV, varsity, has been there. So I'm just wondering why 9.10 is the the coaches for the unified sports, and why that's not listed with the coaches, and why that is separate. Is there any reason for that?
Mr. McLemore?
Thank you, Madam President. That could have been just a clerical error, Mr. Levinstein.
All right. Well, I mean, I think it's honestly, I think it's always been separate, and I don't think it really should be. But I'm just saying, going forward, if that could be listed with the coaches of the other students. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments on everything but 9.4? Roll call on those items, please.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
But let's move on to item 9.4. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion?
Madam President, I'd like to table this item.
Can I have a second to table, please?
So moved.
Thank you. Roll call to table.
Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
I'm going to say no. I have no idea why. I
Mr.
don't know
Walker,
why it's
Mr.
being tabled.
Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. I hope you feel okay. We're going to move on to the clerk of the board, Mr. McCoy.
Good evening, Madam President. I have the approval of the minutes from February 15th and February 28th.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
The questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
And hopefully after all this lively discussion, we'll have some people in the community and maybe some current members of the board looking to run for the board. So if you're interested in running for the board, those information packets are available in my office. The people that are current terms are expiring this year are currently held by Mr. Stridiron, Ms. Maida, and Dr. Henderson. There'll be three-year terms up. You need to get 100 signatures from qualified voters in the district. And those petition packets with the signatures of the 100 qualified voters would need to be returned into the office of the district clerk by April 27th at 5 p.m. That concludes my items, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Benaya,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida.